Hello and welcome to the homework solution for JavaScript and DOM manipulation. In this homework, you are tasked with adding data to a web page in the form of a table and then having a user filter that table based on specific features of the data. There's two levels to this homework. Level 1 is required, so you need to build that table and do a search. And level 2, you need to have multiple searches. For level 1, you're going to use the index.html file provided, and then you're going to add the data from the dataset in the form of JavaScript code. You're going to have to populate the columns date, time, city, state, country, shape, and comments, and then use a form element to filter that data based on the date time. This is what you're given as a starter code for your index.html page. You have your columns here, which you'll populate with the data. Using that form element, you'll filter that data based on a specific date. For level 2, you are complete everything for level 1 and then add multiple input tags or select drop-downs. And one of those is date time, which is required, and you can add city, state, country, and shape. For level 1, this is what your solution will look like. You should be able to populate the table and then use a specific date to filter that table, and this is what should be returned. For level 2, you have multiple search fields, and then you can also do the same thing by entering a specific date, maybe a city. You can enter state, a country, or shape, or all 5. So using the starter code given to you as an app.js file, we're going to go ahead and code for the first level. First, I added some pseudocode to add the data to the table. Here we're going to add the data specifically to the tBody element. If we look at our index.html page, this is our tBody element, and this is where we're going to add the table rows and table data elements, and then append to those table data elements text from that search field. First, we're going to select the tBody element, and then we're going to build a table. We wrote a function called build table, passing the data. We clear that all the existing data from that table. Next, we're going to loop through each object in the data and append a row. Next, we'll loop through each field in the data row and add each value as a table data element. Then finally, we'll build the table when the page loads, and this is calling the build table function, passing in the table data. I'll save that, go to our web page, hit refresh, and there is our data. Now we're going to add the code to search this table for a specific date. For the second part of level 2, I've added some pseudocode to filter the table. So we'll grab the date time value from the filter, check to see if the date was entered, and filter the data based on that date. Apply the filter method to the table data and only keep the rows where the date time value matches the filter value. Then rebuild the table using filtered data, and then we're going to attach an event. That filter button is clicked, it's going to call the filter table function. And then finally we'll rebuild the table when the page loads. Here's my function handle click. So this is going to be where when the filter button is clicked, it's going to call this function. The first thing we want to make sure that the page doesn't refresh upon clicking that form element filter button. Then we're going to get the date by selecting the date time ID from the HTML page, getting the value from whatever we've inputted into the form field. So if we look at our index.html page, this is what we're going to select, this input form, getting that ID of date time. Then we're going to check to see if the date was entered and filter the data using that specific date. If the date is entered, then we apply the filter method. We're going to filter the data, so we'll call filter data. We're going to filter it based on the rows where the row date time value equals the specific date that we entered. When that happens, we will then populate the table with that specific date. So then we call the build table function, passing in our filter data, and that should populate our table based on the specific date. Then we attach an event to listen for the form button. Here's the filtered button ID. When that is clicked, we call the handle click function. which we just have up here, and that will filter our data. And then we also have the code to build the table on initial load. So let's go ahead and save this, refresh our web page, enter a date that we want to filter on, and there we are. So now we can filter our table based on a specific date. So this completes level 1 of the homework solution for JavaScript and DOM manipulation. Now we're going to add multiple search fields and filter the table based on multiple search fields. For level 2, I've added some pseudocode here, and this is what we'll do. We'll have to change the HTML page or the index.html page and add multiple input forms, keep track of all the filtering, because every time we enter a value we need to keep track of that, and then write a function to add all the values from the input fields into a list, and then we can filter that list and populate the table based on those values. So first, in your index.html page, you need to add multiple input forms. So the first one was the date time, and you can copy this and just make other list elements and just change the ID, and you can add your own placeholder if you want. So the ID for this city will be ID city, here's the state, country, and then shape. First, we'll need to keep track of all the filters, so I'm going to create a variable called filters. This is going to be a list of objects. Then I'm going to create a function called update filters, and in here I'm going to create some variables. Here I have created variables so we can save the element, the value, and the ID of the filter that was changed. So the first variable is changed element, and this is using d3.select. So it's going to select all the changed elements that have an input that has been changed. Then we'll have an element value, a variable that's going to get the property value of that changed element. So if we get like a date or a specific state or city, those will be stored as element values. And then we're going to get the filtered ID from that changed element attribute IDs. Then if the filter value was entered, we're going to add that filter ID and value to a filters list. Otherwise, if nothing is entered, then it will clear the filter from the filters object. So if that has changed, the element value has changed, then to the filters dictionary, create a list that will keep the filter ID and the element value. If not, we can delete all that. Next, I wrote a function called filter tables. Then this is going to filter the table. So I also put that function call down here at the end of our update filters, so that at the end of updating our filters, we call the filter table function, and now we can filter our table based on the list. In that filter table function, we set the filter data to the table data. Then we loop through all the filters and keep any data that matches the filter value. So using object.entries, we pass in the filter list, and then map for each key value pair. We'll filter the data based on the key in that row, and if that matches the value that's inputted, we'll populate the table. And finally, we rebuild the table using the filter data, calling build table function, and passing in our filtered data. Then we need to change the code for our event listener. So instead of the ID filter button, we're going to pass in the class filter. And this, instead of click, it should be on change. And this will be update filters. And if we save that, refresh our page, there's our data. Here's our 5 filters. And now we can filter based on a date, based on a city, state, country, and even a shape. And then you can do all 5 if you'd like. And that is a solution for level 2 of JavaScript DOM manipulation.